Joining me on the channel today is Dana Swift, debut author of Cast In Firelight, out January 19th from Delacorte. The novel is the first in an epic fantasy duology about a pair of royal heirs who must work together to uncover a threat to their kingdom. Welcome, Dana.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yay. And so I always like to start at the beginning and explore your path to becoming a published author. What kind of kid were you?
When I was really young, I was the climb the trees, ride the bikes, scrape my knees kind of kid in, 'cause I lived in New Hampshire. And then later on, I moved to Texas and I became a lot more studious and a lot more book-oriented. And I think that's where I really found, right around the age like 10 or 11, I started really reading a lot more and just loving literature and being a little bit more of an introvert, actually.
And so how did you go? What kind of books did you like reading as a kid?
I really liked classics, weirdly enough. Like one of my favorites and still today is like Anne of Green Gables. And then just like I read like the whole Little House on the Prairie when I was a kid. I just read a lot of like classic literature. And then I started, Harry Potter and all the other like fantasy oriented books for sure. But yeah, weirdly enough, classics.
And so how did you go from being a reader to wanting to write your own books?
Yeah, I think it was like during that big move, I became just more like about school and more about reading. And right around age 11, I had a book idea. And then I started writing that first book when I was 14. And I finished it in high school. And I started querying during college. So that first book, I was like, this is it. Like, I'll just keep working on it for years. And like, let's just do this. And then I finally shelved it. And the next book I started working on was actually Cast In Firelight.
Awesome. Okay, so the book that you started when you were, did you say 11?
Yeah, I got the idea for it when I was 11. And then I was just like in the back of my brain. And then at 14, I started like brainstorming in 8th grade during like math class. And then I started writing in like 9th grade.
That's awesome. And how many words was it?
So yeah, I wrote 60,000 words and I threw it out because I was like, this isn't the right place to start. Then I wrote like 100,000 words. It was like a full fantasy book.
That's amazing. In high school when you're 14, like that is like a huge feat. Awesome.
I mean, it wasn't very good,
but you got like the jump start. And like they always say, well, what I've been finding doing this channel is that it takes like 10 years to go from like deciding to be a writer to like actually getting your first thing published. And so that you got like the early start when you were like 14, that means that, you got a little bit of help in
yeah, I put in my decade for sure.
You put in your decade, exactly. And so tell us about the day that you found out your book was going to be published.
Yes, awesome. It was such a weird day. I was working at a bookstore and it was like 7 o'clock at night and it was my late shift break and my agent had called me. So I texted her back, I texted her back being like, what's going on? And she immediately called me and told me while I was standing in the break room of my bookstore job. And I just started crying. And I remember one of my coworkers coming in being like, are you all right? Like, breakdowns at 7 o'clock at night are not normal, And yeah, I just called my parents and called at the time, my fiance. And then I just had to go back to my shift for like the next 3 hours, being like surrounded by books, being like, I will be my book will be one of these one day.
7 o'clock is a little bit of a weird time because the publishing industry is very like 9 to 5. Like it's very rare to hear anything after 5 o'clock. And what are you, East Coast or West Coast?
At the time I was in Texas, so I was central. But I think it was more just the actual offer had come in hours earlier. I was just on the clock and I couldn't access my cell phone. So then my agent was like, okay, finally she's answering. And that's when she called me. So
awesome. And now that you're published, what's a misconception that you had about publishing prior to being published that has now changed?
Yeah, with COVID, everything's a little bit like, what are our expectations anymore? Like, let's just throw them out and just go with the moment. But at the beginning, I really thought like I would have no say on the cover, and that like I wouldn't really have a dialogue as much with like creative aspects, but almost everything about like the cover, and like they wanted my opinion on the artist, they wanted my opinion on like what it looked like each and every step. So I don't know, I think I perceived like that they would take total control, but really there's been a lot of creative input on my end too. So it's been really nice.
Yeah, and your cover is like amazing. It's like one
Yeah.
of the most beautiful covers like I have seen in a while. And like the paint, who's the artist?
It's Charlie Bowater, who, you know, funny enough, I dreamed of her being my cover artist. And I didn't even mention it to them. And the day before, they were like, it's someone really big, so I don't want to tell you yet. And I was like, well, if it's Charlie Bowater big, I don't know. And then the very next day, she's like, it's Charlie Bowater. And I cried so hard that day too. So,
So much crying in
so much
publishing.
happy tears. Yeah.
I love it. So pitch your book. Tell us all about it.
Okay, yeah, I feel like you did such a great job too. It's a young adult fantasy romance. It's about two teens, and they're arranged to be married, and they don't really like each other very much. They have a very bad first meeting in the prologue. And then years later, they mistakenly think they have met someone else. So there's that mistaken identities plot. And when Adra, the main character, discovers her magic is being stolen, the two team up and form a group of vigilantes. And along the way, they still don't know who each other is. So there's a lot of fun rom-com kind of style writing, but it's very action fantasy plot. So it was my like take on combining the two.
Awesome. And it's a duology. So there's going to be two books. That's really exciting. Did you have the second book in mind when you were writing the first one?
Yeah, actually, I mean, fingers crossed, I'm kind of hoping there's a third, so we'll see. But yeah, I've always had an idea of like what the second book would have and what would the third book potentially might have. And I finished writing it in June, and I just got my edit letter back like 2 weeks ago. And so I'm working on all the edits for that.
Oh, cool. And when does the second book come out?
Supposedly it'll be exactly like a year away from Cast In Firelight. So it'll be like January 18th, 2022. But that's tentative because, you know, things might change. But
yeah,
as of now.
Definitely. And what's your favorite step? Is it drafting or revising?
I actually really like revising. I think drafting, especially during like COVID times, was like, I don't know, this is much harder. I just love like having a path and then knowing like, okay, I can deviate, but having that first like something on the page, I think it's much easier and more fun to like mess with it.
Yeah. And what's a revision tip that you've gotten along the way that's been really helpful for you?
Oh yeah, I think like this whole publishing process has showed me so much about like little word choice, like echoes and things like that I never really did in my own writing as much. Like, and then my agent actually, before she took me on, she had this big idea of like changing the ending and creating a little bit more resolution. And I changed the last 10,000 words of Cast In Firelight. And I'm so thankful for that edit because I like the ending so much more. It had a lot more like open threads and was more cliffhanger-esque. So there's just a lot more like talking to professionals. You learn more about like how you should set up your series a little bit more than like how you first envisioned it. So I think it's great to have all the feedback, and I don't know, I love talking. I just talked to my editor yesterday, and it's like I love getting her feedback. I love like talking through problems.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's so wonderful and amazing about traditional publishing is that you get so much feedback along the way. Of course, if you are not a feedback fan, you will hate it.
Yeah.
But I personally love getting like as much feedback as possible. Like, tell me how to make this better. Like everyone's input is like totally welcome, you know, like I love that. And you learn so much.
Yeah, and then like if you have a beta reader, sometimes you're like, oh, I don't know, like these two beta readers have totally different ideas. But when you get like your editor, it's like, okay, like let's do what the editor says in a way. So it feels much more like I'm going to change it to what this person wants instead of like dealing with weighing the two options and not knowing what to do. So sometimes beta readers, I mean, they're great critique partners. I love them. It's just hard when they have different ideas for where to go.
Yeah. It's great having someone like, well, my editor said it, so I have to do it.
Yeah. So like and normally they're very intelligent, very, like, they know what they're doing.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
It's good to hear from them.
And so are you a perfectionist or a chaos artist?
I think I'm a perfectionist, because I am with so many other parts of my life, but I also am a pantser. So it's like, I don't know, I pants in drafting, but then I think I am perfectionist in the revising of like, okay, this needs to be really good. I'll try to make it better.
Do you have a huge ego, or are you humble and demure?
This is such a hard question because it's like, I mean, I want to say I'm humble. I mean, I feel like COVID makes you even more humble because you're just like, I haven't met anyone face to face who like likes my book. So I haven't had that like ego boost of like, oh my gosh, it's real readers out there. It's just people like sometimes messaging me. And so I don't know, I think I'm humble because it all just feels so magical. And like, I'm still in shock sometimes by the whole process.
Are you a morning writer or an evening writer?
I actually work in the evening. Like I like to work really late at night.
Ooh, awesome. That's you rare people are,
Really?
who work at night. Every time there's a night person, I'm like, ooh, that's interesting.
I think it stems from when I was in high school and stuff. I'd have to do my schoolwork, like go to school, do my schoolwork, and only after like homework is done is when I could like stay up late. So I think it's just kind of that's where the habit came from.
Yeah, you got in the habit, you got in the momentum of doing it that way. Are you a plotter or a pantser? I think you said
I'm a pantser, and I write out of order. I go where the story says, and then that's where I like fixed it. I fix it in revising. So that's why I think I like revising better, because it's like pantsing, it's kind of hard, but it's so hard for me to outline because then I feel like the story is already done in my head a lot of ways. So
and how many like revisions did you do before you got your agent and before you got your book deal?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question. So I wrote Cast In Firelight and probably did like a few drafts of it in terms of like with beta readers or just in my own, like, oh, I need to change this, I need to fix that. And then with my agent, she just had the big last 10,000 words edit of changing the ending. So I did that, and then I signed with my agent. And then with my editor, we did the normal, like you do developmental edits, then line edits, then copy edits. So it wasn't big. Like my editor didn't really have anything like where I had to like completely throw away whole scenes or stuff. I actually just added about like 10,000 words and fixed up some plot momentum issues.
Okay, cool. So pretty straightforward. And
yeah,
was there ever a point where you fear, oh no, I'm never going to be published?
Yeah, for sure. During the querying process, I spent about a year querying this book. And fun fact, I was actually like weeks, maybe even days away from shelving Cast In Firelight because I was like, it's been about a year there, and then that's my agent called like set up the call about like a week later. And I was like, oh, and everything just came from there.
That happens so many times whenever people are like, I think I should give up on this. And then someone pulls through and gives the offer or gives the signs for rep. That's awesome. Would you ever like to be famous?
I feel like I want the book to be famous, but I don't really want to be famous, if that makes sense. Like I want the book to do well enough that like people know of it and people actually read it and people are excited about it, but I don't really want to be the person. I actually, Dana Swift is my maiden name, so I kind of have a little bit of separation. Like I don't want people to know sometimes I'm the author unless I say, so.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you could ever have any non-supernatural talent or ability, what would it be?
Ooh, I was thinking about this one, and I think like I just want to move objects with my mind and like make.
But it has to be non-supernatural.
Oh, non-supernatural? So just like any.
Like, would you like to run really fast, or would you,
Oh,
would you
gotcha.
like
I would like to not have to sleep. Like, would that count? Because I don't
yeah,
know. I feel like I get in the gist of writing at night because I like write so late, and then I'm like, oh, I should really sleep because the next day is gonna be terrible if I don't. And then I could read in the night too. That'd be amazing if I could read throughout the night. Oh, I would love that.
yeah, that's a good one. I think there are like some like old school people like who like had this like program where they like wouldn't sleep except for like 2 hours or something, like some like really I have to, it's triggering a memory from like way back when some group of people were like, we want to be really productive and we're gonna like only sleep 2 hours a day, and eventually they got sick, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was like a whole thing.
Like, definitely don't not like, please sleep, people.
What are you working on right now?
I'm actually working on the edits for book 2. I have this in my desk, so I can show you. I print out my edit letter,
Oh.
and then I handwrite like all the little things that need to be fixed in each chapter. And I like writing it all down first, and then like going through the manuscript and then kind of like checking things off so I don't forget anything.
Do you print out your whole manuscript?
I did for like past pages, but no, for edits, it's like it's too much paper.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I don't want to be that wasteful.
Yeah, definitely. And do you use different colored inks, or do you just like stick to the same colored inks when you're like doing your notes?
When I'm doing my notes, I actually like do a lot of like highlighter. Like orange is something that like I need to fix throughout the novel, and then pink was like questions I have for my editor. So yeah, I like to highlight things, I think, more than I like to write in like red or green or anything.
Nice. Thank you so much for being on the channel. I've put buy links below, and definitely follow Dana Swift on social media. Pick up Cast in Firelight at anywhere books are sold, and also at the links below. And thank you again so much for being on the channel.
Thank you so much.